Aloha and welcome to Research and Writing, our RaW series. This is a 4-episode series and you're joining us with episode number 2. This episode focuses on the research process and my name is Natalie. Joining me, I have with me Robin, Rebecca, and Carino. We're your RaW research process crew today. So, how to complete this workshop? First, you need to review our Research and Writing Episode 2 workshop, and along with the video, you need to complete a quiz. So make sure you have the video and quiz up simultaneously so you can work through the quiz as you're watching the video. So in this episode, we're focusing on a couple different things. First, we're going to be learning about different types of sources. We're also going to be looking at strategies to strengthen your searching skills and using the library's databases. We'll also be looking at evaluating websites and mastering note-taking strategies. So go ahead and pause the video here, and I'd like you to complete question 1 on the quiz. Once you're finished completing that question, go ahead and restart the video.
Aloha everyone, it's Karina here. I want to preface this episode by reminding you that research is a process. When you're conducting research, you may at times feel like you're drowning in information. Our hope is that this workshop will really make the research process less intimidating and better equip you to utilize useful search strategies and the tools that are built into the library's databases to really streamline this entire process for you. When tackling a research project, keep in mind that there are different stages you'll be going through. Once you've identified a topic, you'll then have to search for resources, take the time to actually read them, evaluate them to determine what it is they're saying, and then eventually, when you've compiled a useful collection of research, examine it as a whole to see what it says about your research problem. At this point, you may find that your research doesn't meet your need, at which point you may need to start all over again. And that's okay. But it's very important to keep all these different stages in mind so that you ensure you have allotted enough time to move on to the next step, which is synthesizing your research and writing your actual paper. So let's get started by talking about information. We live in a very information-rich world. If you think about it, it's a little scary because you can access millions of records with the push of a button. So because of that, it's really important to know how to use information to your advantage. Now, what we're going to quickly explore right now is the information lifecycle. So we'll be looking at how information is produced, where it comes from, and how it changes over time. So this is the life cycle in a nutshell. Starting from the left, from when the information is available immediately after an event occurs, to the type of information available on the topic after several years to the far right. It's important to keep this life cycle in mind when doing research, as it helps you to determine what type of research materials will be available to you. So the first stage on the left is immediately after the event occurs. You'll likely only be able to find really basic coverage about the occurrence from social media and news outlets. The authors are everyday people like me and you posting on your social media, and journalists and bloggers who are writing the articles. After a few weeks, popular magazines will begin to discuss the event's impact on society and culture. The authors are journalists and commentary is provided by scholars and experts. It's a slightly more detailed analysis, but it's not as detailed as what you'll find in our next resource. So after several months, you might start to see really focused, detailed analysis in scholarly journals. The authors are scholars researching the event's impact, and the articles are intended for scholars in a particular field. And then at the end of the life cycle, after 1 or more years, you'll start to see books on the topic. The books will contain really in-depth scholarly analysis and coverage by authors or journalists. So this shows you how long it takes to produce information on a topic or event and showcases how much time and analysis goes into the creation of journal articles and books. I'm going to hand you off briefly to Robin now, who will be further discussing the types of materials that you'll likely find when conducting research.
So we're going to talk about books, ebooks, and scholarly articles. And we'll talk about websites a little bit later in today's workshop. So with books and ebooks, some of the strengths are that these give a really in-depth analysis. So like Karina mentioned, books are not going to come out usually until a year or several years after an event occurs. So that allows time for this in-depth analysis to happen. Because of the longer amount of time that goes into this, these tend to be more comprehensive and extensively researched. And then another strength of books is that they're organized into chapters. So if there's a chapter that is really specifically about your topic, then that can be really helpful. You might not have to read the whole book, but you might be able to go just to that particular chapter. So that starts going into some of the things we want to keep in mind with books as well. So because the production process is a little bit longer, then of course the information is a little bit older. And then these are also long, right? So if you're having to kind of look through a whole book in order to find the information you need for your particular topic, for your particular course, it can be a little challenging. And depending on what your time frame is for your project, you may or may not have time to be reading a whole book. So these can be helpful, but there are some issues to keep in mind as well. Scholarly articles are going to be helpful for a lot of your writing that you're doing in your college classes. So some of the strengths of scholarly articles is that they're shorter than books. So they're usually maybe like in the 20-page range. And then they're focused on a specific topic. So when you're finding articles that are really focused on what you're researching, you're going to have you're going to have a lot of information on your particular topic. These highlight original research. So you're going to find information that you don't find in other places. They're more recent than books. And then they're also going to contain bibliographic references. So that's helpful because you can know where the information is coming from. If you can know where information is coming from, and you can also dig into those references. If their references sound good and things that might be relevant to your project and helpful things, then you can dig a little bit more into some of those references as well. And then the biggest thing about scholarly articles is that they're peer-reviewed. And so this means that before someone is able to publish a scholarly article, it goes through a review process where other scholars in that field are reading the article and saying, yes, this is something that should be published, that makes a valuable contribution. And so it's kind of like, rather than just having the authors supporting what's said in there, there's kind of a whole community supporting what is said in that article. But some things to keep in mind with scholarly articles is that the jargon or the specialized language can be a challenge. As you're getting into your major, you do want to get familiar with this jargon or the specialized language, but it can be a challenge as well. So, so along with, these sources just being a little bit challenging to read, they're written for scholars in the field. Sometimes you have to kind of take your time reading those sources, and it's almost like, developing a new skill with reading scholarly articles. We want to pause, and I'm going to ask you to pause this video and complete question 2 in the quiz. And when you're done with question 2, you can restart the video.
Hi, it's Karina again. This next session will highlight a few tips that will help you when you're ready to start searching. So without further ado, let's dive into that first tip. Very important thing to do when you have your research question and your research topic is to identify the key concepts in that question. You don't want to type the entire question into the search bar, but what you can do is identify the concepts, and then once you've done that, identify other ways to describe those same concepts. So in this example, my research question is, in the United States, what rights do asylum seekers have? I can identify that there are 3 concepts in that question, the first being United States, the second being rights, and the third being asylum seekers. Now I'm going to think of different ways to describe each of those concepts. This is very important because everybody describes things differently. So while I may write an article about asylum seekers, Natalie might be writing an article about immigrants, or Rebecca might be writing an article about refugees. So by identifying synonyms, I am expanding my search to, retrieve as many relevant results as possible. So for instance, another way of describing the United States might be USA, America, or key figures that impact policy in the United States for immigration, like Donald Trump or Barack Obama. Another way of describing rights might be policy, or legality, or legal process, or procedures. And for asylum seekers, I might also consider searching for immigrants, or refugees, or foreigners. My next tip is to use quotations to lock word order into place. This is called phrase searching. So for instance, if I were to type in rights of immigrants into one of the library's databases, I would see 806 results. If I were to search for rights of immigrants as a phrase though, so locking that word order into place, I'm only seeing 168 results, and I can see based on the titles that those are a little more relevant to what I need. So it's a much more defined, focused search. The next tip I have for you is to truncate your words. You can truncate your words by using an asterisk at the end of a root word to search for variant word endings. So what that does is it tells the database to finish that word for you. For instance, if I were to truncate child by adding that asterisk to the end of child, I would see results for child, childs, children, childish, and childhood. So the database is finding the different ways that that word might be completed, and instead of me having to type out each one of those words, I truncate it and the work is done for me. Last but not least, my final tip for you is to use your powerful Boolean operators. There are 3 Boolean operators, but I'm only going to focus on 2 right now. The 3 Boolean operators are and, or, and not, but we're going to focus specifically on and or. And is when you connect 2 words together, and what you're telling the database is that the first word or concept and the second concept need to be present in the results. This narrows your search, so you might see fewer results, but you'll notice that they're much more relevant. Or expands your search, so you're going to see more results. What you're telling the database when you use or is that either the first word or the second word or both of those words can be present in the database. So when I'm looking at my Boolean operators, I know that I want to connect my key concepts with and my synonyms with or. And this next slide will illustrate that concept a little better for you. So going back to my original research question, in the United States, what rights do asylum seekers have? Each of my key concepts is on its own line, and it's connected to the other concepts with and. The synonyms for each of those key concepts are connected together with or, and you'll notice that the Boolean operators are capitalized. That's very important to make it an actual command. Some databases require it to be capitalized, so it's always good just to do it as a rule of thumb. And I like to, when I'm adding synonyms in, group them in parentheses. If any of you have studied math, you know that it's just kind of like a way to keep order together. And so it's something that is useful as well when you are searching in databases. Pause the video here and complete questions 3 through 9 on the quiz. And once you have done that, come back to the video and we'll restart. So now that you feel confident using those search tips and you're ready to start collecting information, you should go to the library's website and use the databases we subscribe to for your research needs. Now, the term databases may sound intimidating, but really don't let that intimidate or deter you. You can basically think of databases as a collection of highly organized information that can be searched via various fields, including author, title, publication, dates, abstract, and so on. Beyond that, you know that when you're using a library's database, the results are reliable and have been vetted for accuracy. You also have 24/7 access to full-text free items, and most of our databases offer really cool special features like citation generators, easy share options, and free account storage. So I can't promote that enough. Now we're ready to explore two of the library's databases, OneSearch and Academic Search Complete, which is hosted by the EBSCOhost platform. While I'm guiding you through these two search engines, notice that although they may look very different and may access very different types of materials, there are some similarities that will really benefit you. I hope you'll find this next section really useful and that it'll give you a better idea of each database's functionality and some of the special features you should be using when on it. Okay, so let's access the library's website via whatever route is easiest for you. For me, I like to go to Google and just search for UHWO library. It should be the first link to pop up. And here we are, the library's website. You'll notice front and center is this main search bar. This is for your research. So when you type something in here, you're searching for books or ebooks or articles or databases or journals. It's a really comprehensive search. What I want to point out before we actually do a search, though, is this button off to the left-hand side. If I click on it, additional options will appear. So the first 4 options all search in OneSearch. So you can limit to articles if you're looking specifically for articles, or books if you're looking only for books. And then the 5th option is to search for specific databases. So if you really like JSTOR or Project Muse, you could change the type of search you're doing and search for that database. Next is periodicals. And you can think of periodicals as anything that is published on a recurring basis, whether that be daily or weekly or monthly. So it's a way for you to search to see if the library has access to newspapers or magazines or specific scholarly journals. And the last option is a website search. So if you were looking for more information about printing or how to book a study room, you would change your search to this one and then type in your query. But we're going to use OneSearch, which is the main search bar, just to get you comfortable with its functionality. Now, if we think back to our research question, we are interested in the rights of asylum seekers in the United States. So let's say I just type in United States of America, my Boolean operator capitalized, and immigrant rights. A new tab will open with your results. Always a waiting game. Okay, so I have about 40,000 results to look through. What I want to do right now is just kind of highlight the usefulness of the search tips that we previously discussed. So let's say I went back to my search and searched for United States of America and immigrant rights as phrases. So I'm adding those quotation marks around it. I'm going to decrease the amount of results that I'm seeing from 40,000 to just 2. So this really illustrates how powerful these tools are and how you might be too restrictive if you're using them. So 2 is not enough for me. What I want to do at this point is plug in some of my synonyms. So try to expand my search by looking at other ways of describing these words. So now we're going to see that my results have increased from 2 to about 3,000. And they look pretty good, right? Now, what I want to highlight to you is this sidebar on the right-hand side of the page. This is how you can filter or refine, or in this particular database, tweak your results. Most every database that you will use will have options like this. And so if they're presented to you, use them. For instance, looking at the options available to me, I can see that there are different types of materials in the results. And so this kind of shows you how comprehensive of a search one search does. Let's say I was interested in only ebooks. I could click on that, and there should be 9 ebooks, I guess 8. What I want to point out now is that that filter I added has been added to this section at the top, the active filter section. If I want to quickly undo whatever it is that I did, so in this case, I added the electronic books filter, I can click on the little X next to it, and it'll take me back to my previous search. So if we were looking specifically for peer-reviewed articles on this topic, you would want to limit to peer-reviewed journals, and you'll notice that the results decrease with every filter you add. And so I can see in the material type category that there are articles and reviews in these peer-reviewed journals. I am specifically looking for articles, so I'm going to add that filter. And then at the very bottom of this sidebar, I want to look at more recent articles. So articles published between 2012 and 2018. Don't forget to refine, to press that little button. So now I have 375 hopefully really relevant results that are peer-reviewed articles on my topic. Let's take a look at one of these resources. This one looks good to me. And so if you click on it, you'll pull up its item record. You'll notice some useful tools here, including a citation generator. And to actually access the article, you would click on either this link or this link. Now, if you see the screen, it may look like you've run into a dead end. You haven't. What this indicates is just that the article is available in different collections or databases. And so if you click on either of these links, it should connect you to the article. So let's click on the first one. And now we are looking at the article. So this is the item record in the specific database that OneSearch was searching through. And if I wanted to read the article and download it, I could click on PDF full text. If I wanted to see more information about it, I could do that looking over here at the comprehensive information. And then additional tools on the right-hand side. And so this is actually an EBSCOhost database, and we will be exploring that a little more when we discuss Academic Search Complete. So let's explore Academic Search Complete and the EBSCOhost interface a little more. If we are back at the library's website, we know that Academic Search Complete is a database. So I'm going to change the type of search that I'm doing to the Databases tab, and then type in either the first word or the entire title of the database. That search searches through the library's listing of about 200 databases that we subscribe to for UH West Oahu students. And so I can see that there are about 13 that fit that word that I searched for. And the first one is exactly what I'm looking for. So we are here at Academic Search Complete, which is a really comprehensive database. It's multidisciplinary, so it's good for pretty much any topic that you're searching. What I want to highlight before we do anything else is that above this first search bar, if you click on Choose Databases, you can expand your search to different collections under the EBSCOhost umbrella. So Academic Search Complete is good for pretty much any topic that you're doing. But for my topic, let's expand it to maybe legal collection, maybe Soc Index for sociology. If you're not sure what the collection specializes in, you can hover over that yellow bubble to the right of its name, and a summary of its content will appear. So that looks pretty good to me. I'm going to click on OK. I added different collections to my search. And you notice that the interface remains exactly the same, but I can see that I added those different collections up here. So we, again, are searching for information about immigrant rights in the United States. Now, what you'll notice is when you're using EBSCO, it tries to think for you and complete your thought. And if you'll notice here, it automatically populates synonyms for you. So it does that work for you, which is really awesome. The different search bars are connected to each other with our Boolean operator and, which makes it really easy for us to connect our search terms together. My second concept is immigrant rights. And I'm going to do my search. So this is what the search results look like in EBSCO. To refine your results in EBSCO, it'll be on the left-hand side of the page. And I can see really easily how I can limit my results to full text, and it automatically updates full text, peer-reviewed articles. And you'll notice that each time we add a filter, we reduce the amount of results that we see, but it's always really important to limit to full text because you don't want to look at the abstract for a perfect article only to find out that the library doesn't have access to it. So let's say that we are happy with our search, we've added our filters, we're now ready to start looking at the results. I like to click on this page options button and change the result format to detailed. You'll notice how much more text is added to the page. And while it's not that pretty, it really streamlines the process for you. And you'll see why in just a minute. So if I change the result format to detailed, what happens is that the abstract is added to this page. And so it's a lot more text, but you don't have to worry about clicking on something to see if it's something that you want to explore and then going back to the result list if you don't like it or whatever. So let's say that I like this first one. Again, like we saw in that result that we accessed via OneSearch, you can download the PDF full text or use the tools on the right-hand side. My favorite tool is the email tool. If I were to email this to myself, I could add little notes about what class or assignment or why I liked this article. And you can add the citation. So in your inbox, in that email, will be the link to access this item record, the PDF if it's available, and this full citation. So let's say we're using APA. Very important with any computer-generated citation, double check it for accuracy. For instance, with this article, I can see that its title is capitalized. And what that means is in its citation, if I'm not wrong, the title is going to be fully capitalized, and that's incorrect as we know all too well. So the databases aren't perfect, they do make mistakes. Always double check it to make sure that it is accurate. And that's all that we will be looking at in Academic Search Complete. Okay, so we really quickly dived into what OneSearch and Academic Search Complete look like and how they function. I hope you feel a lot more comfortable using both of those resources because they are really useful for you. Right now, it's time for you to pause the video and go back to that quiz. Take a few minutes to reflect on each of the databases that we looked at and let us know what you liked about each of them. Those will be questions 10 through 13 on the quiz. And once you're done with those, we can resume the video.
So earlier, Robin talked about the strengths and weaknesses of books and scholarly articles. Integrating these kinds of sources in your college essays is the norm and is expected by your instructors. However, there might be some circumstances where a website might be utilized, so let's talk about that in more detail. One strength of websites is that they're easily accessible. As long as you have an internet connection and know how to use a search engine, you can easily find tons of results. There often is no membership or fees required to access a website. The circumstance where you might end up using a website is when you're trying to find really recent information. For instance, it could be information on a current social movement or a trending issue. There are also many kinds of websites out there on the web, and there are some sites that have more credibility than others, which I'll talk more about in the next slide. Do keep in mind that websites can be biased. Sometimes it's a single author or organization that writes on an issue or topic with no peer review. This could mean the information presented could be skewed, heavily opinionated, or even incorrect. Unlike scholarly articles and books, websites require extra evaluation to ensure the information being presented is accurate and reliable. If, for example, the information can only be found on one particular site and cannot be corroborated with other sites or scholarly sources, it might not be accurate or reliable. Published websites sometimes might contain typos or informal language, such as acronyms or emoticons. This might impact the takeaway message from the source and can also be used as a red flag to determine that the source might not be reliable. There are different types of website domains, and all tend to have difference in credibility. How credible you might view a source can be seen with our UH West Oahu Pueo here. So starting off with .com. .com is a commercial site. The information provided by commercial interests is generally going to shed a positive light on the product that the site is promoting. So while the information might not necessarily be false, you might be only getting one part of the picture. There's monetary incentive behind every commercial site in providing you with information, whether it's for good public relations or just to sell you a product. The next site is .edu, which is for an educational institution. Sites using this domain name are schools ranging from kindergarten to higher education. If it's from a department or research center at an educational institution, that information can generally be taken as credible. However, students' personal websites are not usually monitored, and they live in .edu websites. So they should be scrutinized or examined very carefully. The next one is a .gov site, and it stands for government sites. And all branches of the US federal government use this domain. So you might find things such as census statistics, congressional hearings, and Supreme Court rulings on these types of websites. And the information here is considered to be from a credible source. The next one are .orgs. These sites are traditionally sites for nonprofit organizations, such as the American Red Cross or PBS. They use this domain suffix. And generally, the information in these types of sites are credible and unbiased, but there are examples of organizations that strongly advocate specific points of views over others, such as the National Right to Life Committee or Planned Parenthood. You might want to give this domain a closer scrutiny these days, especially with commercial interests that might also sponsor these org sites. And then the last is .net, which stands for network. This is a catch-all domain. You might find any kind of site under this domain suffix. Information from these sites should be given careful scrutiny and be avoided in being used in your papers at all costs.
Okay, so Becca mentioned using website domains as one way to evaluate your sources, and I'm going to present another way to evaluate your sources as well. So this is something you want to be doing as you're looking for your sources and before you're reading them. So I kind of think of it as a way to work smarter instead of working harder, right? Because we can be reading a lot of sources, but if we then find out, hey, those are not really great sources, then that's kind of wasting our time. So if we can evaluate our sources at the beginning, that's going to be a better way to spend our time. And so evaluating sources is always helpful, but especially with web sources. So going back to what Karina was talking about, the library sources have already been vetted. There's experts that look at whether it's a quality source or not, but we all know there's all kinds of information up on the web. So especially when you're working with web sources, you want to be really careful about evaluating your findings. So one really common great tool for evaluating sources is the CRAP test. And so CRAP stands for currency, relevance, authority, accuracy, and purpose. So as we go through this section, go ahead and open up these two links. So we have bit.ly/UHWOCRAAP and bit.ly/RaW Asylum. And so while you're opening those up, the Asylum one is going to be our web resource that we're going to evaluate. And then the CRAP test is our tool that we're going to be using to evaluate our source. So, okay, so the first one is with currency. So the first step with currency, if you look at question 1 over here, is you need to kind of make this decision for yourself, depending on your topic, how current do your sources need to be. And so if we work with our topic of looking at the rights of asylum seekers, we might ask ourselves, how current do we feel our information needs to be? Is it 1 year old, 5 years old, 10 years old, or no date limit, or does it matter how old they are? Okay, I'm going to go over these 2, and then I'm going to have you folks put your responses in the quiz. Question number 2 is then looking at your source and looking at whether it meets your criteria. So I'm thinking that for the rights of asylum seekers, we probably want something more recent, right? Maybe in the 1 to 5 year old range. So let's jump to our browser and our article and take a look at what we can find about when that source was published. Okay, so when we are looking at this source, we are going to want to scroll through and see if we can find any information on when this source was published or updated. And when I was looking on this earlier, the only date I could find was all the way down here. That's kind of a copyright date for the entire source. So I'm feeling a little bit iffy about that piece. So I'm going to ask you to pause the video here and go to your quiz and answer questions 1 and 2 under currency. Okay, so now we're going to jump to our second criteria in the CRAP test, which is relevance. So under relevance, we're looking at, is this source relevant to your research question? So one way to kind of assess that is to look at how many usable quotes did you find. So if our research question is what are the rights of asylum seekers in the US, we're looking at how many quotes are we finding in this source that we would want to use in our paper. Is it 3 quotes? Is it 2 quotes? Is it no quotes? So as I was looking through this source, we can see this is about who is eligible, right? I don't know if it talks too much about the rights. Let's look at our second question under relevance. So our second question under relevance is, do you think you could explain the information in this source to someone else? So again, you're going to kind of take a look through that article, and this is a self-assessment, right? Do you feel like, yeah, I understand this whole thing? Then I'm going to give it 6 points. I can explain the whole thing to someone else. I can explain about half of it. There are some parts that are a little bit challenging for me, or I can only understand certain sentences. So I'm having a really hard time understanding this source. So again, if you can pause the video here and then go and answer under the relevance section of the quiz, questions number 1 and 2, and then restart the video. Okay, so now we're going to jump to our authority section. So in this one, again, we have 2 questions. So the first question is, the author, publisher, source, or sponsor of this information is, and is it giving us a real person, meaning like their first and last name? Is it giving us a real organization, meaning a government, a business, or institution? Is it giving us a username or a pseudonym, or is there just no author given at all? Okay, so again, we're going to scroll through our source and look at whether there's an author's name given. The second thing we want to look at under authority is what do we know about this author? So either the author is A, very qualified to write on this topic and has formal training, or B, qualified to write on the topic but has no formal training. So to me, the difference between that, I think when it's saying formal training, that's usually going to be a degree, right? They have their degree in this area, whereas the qualification, it might be they have experience with this topic, but not necessarily a degree. And then C, they're not qualified to write on the topic and has no formal training, or we have no information about this author. And so for this source, what I found was if I click on the author's name over here, it takes me to a few paragraphs that tell me a little bit about the author. So for this situation, I can read this and decide on my answer. With some other sources, you might have to Google the person, or there might be other ways to find the information about the author. Okay, so go ahead and pause the video there and respond to questions 1 and 2 under authority in the quiz. And when you're done, you can restart the video. Okay, so we're going to go to accuracy. We have 2 more criteria, accuracy and purpose. So with accuracy, we're looking at, does the author cite other experts? And does this information have spelling, grammar, or typographical errors? So again, we're going to look to our source. I'm not sure if I saw citations in this one, although I did see a reference to some kind of government document over here. And then we can look through and look if we see any typos. So again, pause your video and scroll through the article and answer questions 1 and 2 under accuracy before restarting the video. Okay, this is our last criteria for the CRAP test. We're looking at purpose. So we want to look at what is the main purpose of this article, of the information in this article, right? Why is this article published? So is the author trying to provide facts or teach something? Are they trying to sell something, or are they trying to provide entertainment? And so again, you can see if they're trying to provide facts or teach something, we earn 2 points here, and if not, that's 0 points. And then number 2, does the author make the intention or purpose of this information clear? So do they make clear that they're trying to provide facts or teach, or is it, are they kind of trying to hide their motives here? Okay, so pause the video and answer questions 1 and 2 for purpose, and then you can restart. So the CRAP test, so you can add up your points, and you'll notice at the top of our CRAP sheet, it says you need at least 22.5 points to pass. So this is just a good rule of thumb to evaluate your sources and make sure you have good sources that you're working with.
All right, I'm back. So if you find a source that passes the CRAP test, you should definitely download it and cite it. When going through the source, things you might want to highlight are key concepts related to the issue, what the main argument of a source is, and any significant findings, if the source is a study, or any strong points the source provides. It is also important to annotate. Take notes alongside your reading, whether it's inserting a comment or questions in a PDF or jotting notes on your printed source. Here are some ways that you can make sense of what you're reading. Instead of just reading through it, think critically about your source. If you have a research question, what answer is your source providing? If you are arguing something, does this source support or rebut your claims? What do you or don't you agree with in the source, and why? It's also important to be aware of what you do and don't understand. You might need to find more sources to make sense of what you don't understand. Also, if you need to find more sources and one particular source seems to be relevant to your assignment, you may want to look at what's being cited. So this is the web source that was presented earlier. In this case, I have printed out the web article and took notes manually. I jot questions down and highlight important key terms. Once I've taken notes and made sense of the source, another way to document that is through an annotated bibliography. Sometimes you might need 10 sources or more, and it's easy to forget what each source means to you or how you're going to use it in your paper. So an annotated bibliography is a way to provide synopsis of what each source is. In the case of this article, I seem to take away that this source provides a lot of background info on the requirements needed to be met for one to be eligible for asylum.
All right, guys, so now it's time to finish up your quiz. You should have a couple remaining questions on your quiz, so go ahead and finish those up. And don't forget to hit submit on that quiz. Now, this is really important for those of you who are watching the video and taking the quiz for extra credit. Make sure that you complete the quiz, and you should be getting an update of your scores within 2 weeks. Now, after those 2 weeks pass and you receive the email, you should forward that email to your instructor, and that's how you'll receive credit for completing this workshop. And on behalf of our entire RaW Skills team, we would like to wish you a huge mahalo for joining us. It's been wonderful having you. And I did want to invite you to our live session. Our next episode will focus on the outlining and writing process. That will be episode number 3, hosted on Thursday, October 4th. Mahalo, and see you then.